Long ago, before the creation of Eve, there was Lilith, Adam's first wife, a powerful and controversial figure who challenged the established order in the Garden of Eden. By rejecting submission and choosing freedom, Lilith has become a symbol of female resistance and autonomy, a story rich in mystery that forces us to rethink traditional narratives about gender and power. Want to know more about this fascinating mythological figure and his resignification over the centuries? Subscribe to our channel and explore the trajectory of Lilith, the woman who refused to be controlled. A long time ago, even before the creation of Eve, there is a legend that talks about Lilith, Adam's first wife. Forgotten by many and hidden in the shadows of Scripture, its history is surrounded by mystery and controversy. Lilith, created at the same time as Adam and made of the same primordial clay, was a woman different from Eve in every way. While Eve was molded from Adam's rib, created to be his submissive companion, Lilith was generated with the same substance, with the same status, and therefore did not accept Adam's impositions. This woman dared to challenge established conventions and paid a heavy price for her rebellion. According to tradition, Lilith was created in the image and likeness of Adam, not as a part of him, but as his partner. They were placed together in the Garden of Eden, a place of perfection and harmony, destined to populate the earth. However, the first seeds of discord soon emerged. Lilith, realizing that she had been made of the same stuff as Adam, refused to submit to his authority. In his view, she was not to be inferior or servant, but equal. This desire for equality ended up generating a deep conflict between the two. Adam, conformed to the hierarchy established by God, demanded that Lilith obey him, but she was not willing to give up her freedom. This confrontation culminated at a crucial moment. The sexual act, which was supposed to be a symbol of union, became the definitive breaking point. Lilith refused to lie down below Adam, stating that both should be equal at this time as well. She saw no point in subordinating herself to him, since in their essence, they were made of the same substance. Adam, however, demanded that she fulfill her role. Lilith's refusal was not only a challenge to Adam's will, but also to the divine system itself that organized the world under a male power structure. In an act of desperation and fury, Lilith decided to abandon Eden. She pronounced God's secret name, an act that granted her unimaginable powers, and with that, flew away, leaving Adam in paradise behind. His escape was not only physical, but symbolic. Lilith rejected the idea of submission, of being relegated to an inferior role. His decision to leave Eden represented a radical choice for freedom, even if it meant isolation and banishment. Adam, in turn, was devastated. When he realized that he had lost his companion, he begged God to bring her back. 3 angels, Sinoi, Sansonoi, and Samangaloth, were sent to search for Lilith in the depths of the Red Sea, where she had found refuge among demons and dark spirits. The angels offered him the chance to return to Eden, promising forgiveness and reconciliation. However, Lilith refused. She preferred freedom in exile to a life of servitude alongside Adam. The angels then warned her, if she did not return, 100 of her children would die every day. Lilith, despite feeling the pain of the loss of her descendants, kept her decision. This act of rebellion transformed her from a simple woman into a mythological figure of immense power. She would then become not only Adam's first wife, but the mother of demons, queen of succubi, an entity that would dwell in the depths of darkness, associated with destruction, chaos, and death. This narrative of Lilith as Adam's first wife raises profound questions about the role of women in creation and mythology. Lilith represents the archetype of the woman who challenges the patriarchal order, who refuses to be subordinated and therefore is demonized. Religious and mythological tradition was not kind to Lilith. From her refusal to accept submission, she was associated with evil forces, seen as the mother of demons, a dangerous and seductive entity that preyed on children and pregnant women, perpetuating her role as a villain in the dominant narratives. However, this view of Lilith as a negative figure also reflects fears and anxieties regarding female power and independence. Lilith is not only a mythological character, but also a symbol. Over the centuries, it has been interpreted in different ways. For some, it is the representation of chaos, disorder, rebellion that challenges the status quo. For others, especially in modern times, Lilith is seen as an icon of freedom and feminine strength, a woman who did not accept being controlled by a patriarchal system and chose her own path, even if it meant being condemned. The story of Lilith and Adam is a powerful metaphor about the conflict between freedom and authority, between equality and hierarchy. The fact that Lilith was excluded from the main creation narratives, being replaced by Eve, reveals the desire to control and limit the role of women in sacred history. Eve, being created from Adam's rib, was molded to be submissive and obedient, in direct contrast to Lilith, who fought for her autonomy from the beginning. Even after her expulsion from Eden, Lilith continued to exert a strong influence on legends and the popular imagination. It appears in various traditions, from Jewish folklore to the occult and modern literature. In some narratives, Lilith is a seductive figure who lures men to perdition. In others, she is a mother of demons, responsible for misfortunes and curses. However, in all these depictions, there is a common element. Lilith never submitted. His independence and his choice for freedom were the reasons for his downfall, but also the source of his power. Today, Lilith is often reinterpreted as a symbol of resistance. Feminist and women's empowerment movements have recovered their image as an icon of women who do not accept being defined by society's expectations. She is the representation of the indomitable feminine, of the power that refuses to be controlled. Her story, once told as that of a demon, came to be interpreted as that of a brave woman who dared to challenge male power in a world that sought to subjugate her. The legend of Lilith, Adam's first wife, reminds us that myths are not just stories from the past. They reflect our anxieties, our desires, and our contemporary struggles. Lilith, with her refusal to be submissive, challenges patriarchal power and forces us to question traditional narratives about gender, power, and freedom. By claiming her autonomy, she becomes a timeless figure, a woman who continues to inspire, haunt, and challenge those who dare to tell her story. Lilith, by rejecting her submission to Adam, establishes the first great act of rebellion in the creation myth. Your escape from Eden is not just a physical escape, it is a symbolic act of liberation. In her decision to abandon paradise, Lilith chooses a much more dangerous but infinitely freer fate. This choice marks the fine line between the divine and the profane, the boundary she crosses by choosing not to be controlled. And so, from that moment of rupture, Lilith becomes something different from any other human being. She is no longer just the first woman, but the first to defy norms and seek a life outside of God's original design. One of the most fascinating facets of this myth is how Lilith, in exercising her freedom, transforms herself from a divine creature into a demonic figure. After her escape, Lilith takes refuge in the Red Sea, a place surrounded by mysteries and, in Jewish tradition, associated with chaos and the forces of disorder. This location is not random. By abandoning Eden, the place of perfect order, Lilith finds refuge in a space that symbolizes primordial chaos, an environment in which she can flourish outside of divine rules. Over the centuries, this transformation of Lilith into a demonic entity is widely explored in various traditions. She becomes the mother of demons, reigning over evil spirits that roam the earth. This direct association with evil, however, is more a projection of cultural anxieties than an inherent condemnation of its nature. Lilith is a threat to patriarchy and therefore should be demonized. The vision of a woman who rejects submission and instead chooses her own independence is a deeply disturbing idea for patriarchal societies. It defies the natural order imposed by God and is thus condemned to wander through eternity as a force of destruction. In the Kabbalistic tradition, Lilith is often associated with evil for her relationship with Samael, a fallen angel who, in Kabbalah, represents the dark side of the divine. Lilith and Samael are described as a kind of unholy counterpart to Adam and Eve. Where Adam and Eve represent divine union and the continuity of creation, Lilith and Samael personify the opposite side: destruction, disorder, and lust. This association with Samael reinforces the image of Lilith as a figure of temptation and destruction, but also as someone who has allied herself with a force that shares her vision of independence. The relationship between Lilith and Samael is symbolic on many levels. While Adam and Eve are the archetypes of the controlled divine union, Lilith and Samael represent chaos, uncontrolled sexuality, the union of two entities that refuse to accept God's control. In this way, Lilith is seen not only as a demonic figure, but as a representative of female sexual freedom, something that has been repressed in many societies throughout the ages. This relationship between Lilith and sexuality is a constant in her representation throughout history. Lilith is often portrayed as This relationship between Lilith and sexuality is a constant in her representation throughout history. Lilith is often portrayed as a succubus, a female demon who seduces men while they sleep. In the medieval imagination, it is seen as an entity that causes nocturnal pollution in men, draining their sexual energy. This view of Lilith as a demonic seductress reflects, once again, the fear that patriarchal cultures have of female sexual power. Lilith's ability to seduce and destroy men through sex makes her a symbol of uncontrolled lust, something that needed to be repressed. On the other hand, this view of Lilith as a succubus is also a way of controlling and blaming women for men's desires and weaknesses. Rather than acknowledging male desire as a natural part of humanity, it is projected onto Lilith, the demonic figure who causes these desires. In this sense, Lilith carries with her the sins of man. Their rebelliousness and sexuality are transformed into weapons that, in the view of men, cause destruction and death. This narrative of Lilith as a demonic seductress is also explored in various literary and artistic works over the centuries. In Goethe's Faust, for example, Lilith is mentioned as Adam's first wife, a figure of temptation and destruction. For Goethe, Lilith represents the uncontrollable desire that leads to ruin, a theme that recurs in romantic literature, where female desire is often portrayed as a dangerous and destructive force. In the poetry of Dante Gabriel Rossetti, Lilith is described as a woman of unparalleled beauty, but whose power lies in her ability to control and destroy men. However, this view of Lilith as a seductive villain is not universal. From the 20th century, with the emergence of feminist movements, Lilith was resignified as a symbol of resistance and freedom. Instead of being seen as a demonic figure, she came to be celebrated as a woman who refused to accept submission and fought for her autonomy. Lilith has become an icon of feminism, representing the woman who does not accept being defined by society's expectations and who fights for her right to be free. This resignification of Lilith as a feminist figure is deeply significant. In the modern world, where women continue to fight for equal rights and the freedom to be who they are, Lilith represents the idea that freedom and autonomy are more important than social acceptance. She is the embodiment of the desire to be free, even if that freedom comes at a price. Her choice to leave Eden and live in exile symbolizes the struggle of all women who refuse to accept the restrictions imposed by patriarchal society. Lilith has also become a popular symbol in contemporary culture, appearing in various forms of media, from movies and television series to games and comic books. In many of these depictions, Lilith continues to be seen as a figure of power and seduction, but with a more complex nuance. She is no longer just the villain, but a multifaceted character who represents both rebelliousness and feminine strength. In television series such as Supernatural and True Blood, Lilith is portrayed as an ancient and powerful figure, an entity that transcends human morality and wields enormous power over the fate of others. Lilith has also become a symbol in music and art, where she is often used as a representation of female power. Many rock and heavy metal bands, for example, use Lilith as a figure of strength and rebellion, reflecting her status as a character who defies social and religious conventions. In art, she is often depicted as a powerful and sensual woman whose strength comes from her ability to control her own sexuality and destiny. Despite her transformation over the centuries, the figure of Lilith continues to fascinate and inspire. His story of rebellion and exile resonates with many of those who fight against social and religious impositions. Lilith is not only Adam's first wife, but a symbol of something greater, the eternal struggle for freedom and equality. Her legacy continues to grow, reflecting humanity's anxieties and hopes regarding female power, freedom, and the desire for control. Lilith's story, from first wife to demon, from villain to feminist heroine, is a testament to how cultural narratives can be shaped and reshaped over time. She is a complex figure who embodies both fear and admiration, both temptation and force. And above all, Lilith is a character who refuses to be forgotten, constantly defying attempts to control her, whether in Eden or in humanity's cultural imagination. This transformation of Lilith over the centuries reflects the change in social attitudes towards women and female power. Where once Lilith was seen as a threat to be suppressed, she was now seen as a source of power that could be exploited. This power, however, was not without danger. Lilith continued to be a force that defied men, and that if invoked recklessly, could lead to destruction. In the literature of the time, Lilith appears as a femme fatale, a woman of incomparable beauty who leads men to ruin. Writers such as Goethe and Rossetti saw in it the symbol of female desire that cannot be controlled, a desire that consumes and destroys those who try to control it. In Rossetti's poetry, Lilith is described as a woman whose beauty conceals a dangerous and destructive nature, a woman whose strength lies in her ability to seduce and destroy men. This view of Lilith as a femme fatale holds up in popular culture to this day. In films, television series, and modern literature, Lilith is often portrayed as a seductive power figure, a woman who uses her sexuality as a weapon against those who try to control her. However, from the 20th century onwards, this view began to change. Lilith began to be reinterpreted as a figure of female empowerment, an icon of resistance against patriarchal norms and the struggle for autonomy. Lilith, in this new context, is seen as a woman who does not accept being defined by society's expectations. His refusal to submit to Adam is seen as an act of courage, not rebellion. She is celebrated as a figure of resistance, a woman who chose her own freedom, even if it meant being banished from paradise. Today, Lilith is seen as a symbol of female empowerment, a figure who inspires women to fight for their rights and autonomy. His story of rebellion and exile is a reminder that freedom comes at a price, but that price is worth it. Lilith represents the struggle of all women who refuse to accept the roles imposed on them by society and who fight for their right to be free. This resignification of Lilith reflects the change in social attitudes towards women and female power. Where once Lilith was feared and demonized for her refusal to submit, today she is seen as a figure of inspiration and power. Its history continues to evolve, reflecting humanity's anxieties and hopes regarding female power and the fight for equality. Lilith, over the centuries, has become a powerful archetype, symbolizing both the fear of female liberation and feminine strength itself in its rawest and most indomitable form. Its history transcends religious and cultural boundaries, finding a place in virtually all forms of modern art and communication. From music to literature, through television, cinema, and even comics, Lilith has been rescued and reinterpreted countless times, always reflecting the challenges and transformations of society in relation to independence and female identity. In the field of visual arts, Lilith has been depicted in a variety of ways, ranging from a tantalizing and shadowy figure, a demonic queen, and an empowered goddess. Pre-Raphaelite art, for example, depicted Lilith ambiguously as a woman of supernatural beauty, but charged with an aura of mystery and danger. Dante Gabriel Rossetti, one of the great names of the pre-Raphaelite movement, captured Lilith in his painting Lady Lilith, 1866 to 1868, showing her as a woman of ethereal beauty, combing her long golden hair. The image highlights Lilith's sensuality and feminine power, but also suggests a potentially destructive nature, a woman who is in complete control of herself and her surroundings. Rossetti saw Lilith as a femme fatale, a woman whose power over men was irresistible and dangerous. This theme of Lilith as a man-destroyer, seductress, and fatale has resonated with many artists over the centuries. However, by depicting her with such intensity, these artists also made her a symbol of strength and control. Lilith's beauty in these works is her weapon. His ability to manipulate and dominate those around him is seen as both a powerful and feared quality. This dualism between attraction and fear, between desire and destruction, is what makes Lilith so fascinating and multifaceted. With the advent of the 20th century, Lilith began to emerge as a central figure in feminist art. For many artists, she was no longer just the villain or the temptress, but rather the heroine of her own story, a woman who dared to rebel against patriarchal control and suffered the consequences for it. Rather than being demonized for her choice of autonomy, Lilith came to be seen as a figure of resistance, a pioneer who chose exile and freedom over the safety of paradise in submission. This theme resonates in contemporary works that seek to explore female sexuality and independence, without the filters of traditional morality. Contemporary art continues to reimagine Lilith, often in subversive ways. She is portrayed as a woman who embraces her darkness and finds power in her own nature. Instead of being tamed or punished, Lilith, in modern art, finds its strength precisely in its rejection of imposed norms. This modern depiction of Lilith reflects the profound changes that society has experienced in relation to the understanding of the feminine and the role of women in the world. Artists such as Kiki Smith, who explore themes of body, sexuality, and power, find in Lilith a perfect figure to represent the woman who refuses to be restrained or labeled. In cinema, Lilith also found a new place of prominence. In the horror genre, she often appears as a figure of supernatural power and control, a demonic queen, or an irresistible seductress. Films like The Queen of Hell, 1969, or Lilith, 2018, explore this more traditional view, where Lilith is represented as a dark antagonist, linked to destructive power and chaos. However, there are films that try to humanize her figure, showing her not as a demonic villain, but as a woman in search of freedom and justice in a world that condemns her for being different. In popular television series, Lilith has been portrayed in an interesting way. In the series Supernatural, for example, Lilith appears as one of the first and most powerful demonic figures, an antagonist who challenges the protagonists over several seasons. Her depiction as an immortal and ruthless force is in line with the traditional view of Lilith as Queen of Demons, but the show also subverts this image, suggesting that her power and her rebelliousness are, in some ways, the fruit of the injustice and repression she suffered at the beginning of time. The series, like many other modern depictions of Lilith, explores her duality, both a force of destruction and a figure who ultimately seeks her own autonomy. Another notable example is the Lucifer series, in which Lilith appears as the mother of Mazikeen, a demon who helps the main character, Lucifer Morningstar. In this version, Lilith is not only shown as an evil figure, but as a powerful and complex mother, a woman who has made difficult choices to protect her own freedom and that of her descendants. This Lilith is a much more multifaceted character than the traditional demonized version, reflecting the growing acceptance of more nuanced and empathetic representations of her figure. In comic book culture, Lilith has also found a home. In DC Comics and Marvel publications, Lilith appears as a character who defies the conventions of good and evil, often portrayed as an entity who manipulates heroes and villains, but also as someone who seeks to restore balance in a universe that has often rejected her. Marvel, for example, has portrayed her in several stories as the Mother of Demons, a character who uses her power to fight those who have imprisoned or controlled her. While her intentions may seem evil at first glance, stories often suggest that she is only trying to protect those who are like her, beings who have been demonized for refusing to conform to divine or human rules. This arc of Lilith as a complex figure, rather than a villain outright, reflects the way modern society is beginning to reevaluate morality and cultural traditions. In the past, Lilith was seen as the embodiment of female evil, a woman who used her sexuality and power to destroy men and cause chaos. Today, however, there is an attempt to understand the figure of Lilith in a broader context, recognizing that her rebelliousness was a response to oppression and that her rejection of submission was, in fact, an act of courage. At the same time, contemporary psychoanalysis continues to explore Lilith as a central archetype in understanding the dynamics of power, repression, and freedom. Carl Jung, in his studies of archetypes, saw in Lilith a manifestation of the dark side of the female psyche, the repressed part that, when neglected, can emerge in destructive ways. For Jung, the figure of Lilith symbolizes the collective unconscious that carries the dark, repressed aspects of humanity, those desires and impulses that are suppressed by culture and morality, but which, when released, can manifest in powerful ways, both for good and for bad. This concept of Lilith as the collective shadow was later expanded by feminist scholars of psychology who saw in it not only the repression of female sexuality, but also the repression of women's creative and autonomous power. Throughout history, women have often been forced to repress their desires and ambitions, to conform to societal expectations of submission and obedience. Lilith, by refusing these expectations, represents the rejection of the shadow imposed by cultural norms. Accepting Lilith, integrating her strength and her rebelliousness into the female psyche, is an important step for women to free themselves from the shackles of patriarchy and achieve true autonomy. In the academic literature, Lilith is also a topic of great interest, especially in the field of gender studies and the social sciences. Her story is often used as a metaphor for the experiences of women over the centuries. Women who, like Lilith, have been marginalized, demonized, or punished for daring to defy societal expectations. Many feminist scholars see in Lilith a model for understanding the power structures that keep women in subordinate roles, and how these structures can be deconstructed. In contemporary philosophy, especially within post-colonial and post-structuralist studies, Lilith is seen as an example of resistance to cultural hegemony. It represents the marginalized voices that have been silenced and oppressed, but who, over time, find ways to resist and challenge the dominant order. This philosophical reading of Lilith as a subversive figure who resists authority and refuses to be defined by others is powerful, especially at a time when debates about identity, power, and autonomy are at the center of academic and political discussions. Lilith, then, is not just a symbol of the repressed feminine, it is a symbol of all forces that challenge authority, domination, and repression. It represents the voice that refuses to be silenced, the force that refuses to be subdued. His story is both a warning and an inspiration, a reminder that freedom comes at a cost, but that it's a cost that is often worth paying. Today, as the world continues to debate issues of gender, power, and identity, the figure of Lilith remains more relevant than ever. Her legacy as Adam's first wife, a woman who refused submission and chose her own path, resonates deeply at a time when women continue to fight for their rights and for their freedom. Lilith, at its core, is a symbol of resistance and power. It represents the refusal to be controlled, the strength to be free, even if it means walking a lonely path. And so, the legend of Lilith continues to grow, no longer as a figure of destruction and chaos, but as an icon of transformation, freedom, and strength. She is the reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is power in choice, the power to be free, to be independent, and to be the master of your own destiny.